So there's another snowstorm outside. It's Louisville, Kentucky. I hear the snow trucks going by. Muldrow. So Muldrow snow trucks are fucking badass. They're on it right now, 9:30 at night. They're already starting to clear the roads, making it easier for having to do it in the morning. Their trash service is actually incredible too. It's real quiet here. The Marathon gas station did get broken into, and anything's possible in any community that you're at. But so far it has been a peaceful and quiet and nice stay here in Muldrow. So, talking about constitutions, I want to get to the section 2 of Kentucky's Constitution, which is, the backstory is amazing, okay? So section 2 doesn't say much, but it says, absolute and arbitrary power is denied. So absolute and arbitrary power of the lives, liberty, and property of free men exist nowhere in a republic, not even in the largest majority. So let's read this again. Here are salt trucks. It's good work. So absolute and arbitrary power denied. Absolute and arbitrary power of the lives, liberty, and property of free men exists nowhere in a republic, not even in the largest majority. Now the reason why this was written, the framers of the Constitution of 1850 added this section as an attempt to guarantee that no future legislative majority would emancipate Kentucky's slaves without compensation to the slave owners. Although there was an effort to delete this section from the current Constitution on the grounds it was an obsolete relic of the days of slavery and only stated a truism, the delegates voted to retain it as a necessary restriction on the potentially absolute power of the legislature. So the argument is, it's a truism, and so even though the intent of it was to stop slavery from being taken away instead of like them being paid for it, it has become just a truism. Absolute and arbitrary power is just illegal. So it's saying all absolute and arbitrary power all throughout the Commonwealth is illegal. And so if they're actually being honest with that, if they're actually being truthful with that, then that means any time somebody says they have power over somebody else arbitrarily, and they say they have absolute power, which is dictatorships in workplaces, in the political sphere, in militaries, in schools. So anytime the dictator says, hey, do this, no. Section 2 of the Constitution says no arbitrary and absolute power. You can't just be going around saying do this, do that. That's fucking, absolute and arbitrary power. So that's bullshit and illegal. And so because of the actual language of it, it has retained. It's kept going, and it's been applied in several different cases. So yeah, that was section 2. I thought was incredible because it started out as being a future, as an attempt to guarantee that no future legislative majority would emancipate Kentucky slaves without compensation to the slave owners. And that kind of goes to the history of the Constitution. So I want to get into the history of Kentucky's Constitution because, it matters. It matters the continuity of the thing and the problems that the old constitutions had. We will see again with today's Constitution. With all the old constitutions, it was hard to start a constitutional convention. It's hard to just start one, willy-nilly out of nowhere. It took them about 10 conventions were held before the 1792 Constitution was created. So it took 10 conventions, including Wilkinson's Spanish Conspiracy, where he tried to get Kentucky to declare their independence as long as they would accept themselves being a colony of Spain. And so we would have been speaking Spanish, but we would have had access to the Mississippi and to New Orleans, which was a huge trading port back in the day. So virtually, I want to say nearly all 26, but that's not totally true. They all came from, I don't want to make up a number, but the first Constitution, 27 of the 28 sections came from the first Pennsylvania Constitution of 1790. So Kentucky's, the 1792 Constitution is like, they copied it to 1799, to the 1851, to the 1891. So the 1891 is the one that we're going on now. There's been 3 other constitutions beside the 1891, and they've all built on the same exact same sections. And so really they copied a lot of the same language. And so the current Constitution has the language of the first Constitution, and the first Constitution came from the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1790. 1790. Okay, so here's a background about the Pennsylvania Constitution. This is from socialrollins.edu, Pennsylvania State Constitutions. After the American colonies declared their independence from Great Britain with the Declaration of Independence, the state of Pennsylvania drafted their first constitution in 1776. The primary goal of Pennsylvania's state constitution was to create a more democratic form of government. Previously, the American colonies were governed by British officials. This made the people of Pennsylvania feel underrepresented by the British government, so they decided to create their own form of government. Highlights of the state constitution include: there is voting requirements. All tax-paying white males could vote. So if a person owned property, they paid taxes, therefore they voted. They had taxation and representation. The establishment of a unicameral legislatures, and members only served one-year terms. So there was only one house. It wasn't a dual house. There was only one legislature, and then all the members only served for 1 year. So every year they had to be reelected. The representatives did. The abolishment of a state governor instead of president was elected by the legislature. So the first Pennsylvania Constitution abolished the state governor and just made the position of president. A judicial branch of government separate from the state legislature. Members served a 7-year term and could be removed at any time. So a independent judiciary, which not a lifetime but a 7-year appointment, when they could be removed at any time. The establishment of the Council of Censors. They were elected every 7 years and were the only government body that could amend and declare if the government violated the Constitution. So the Council of Censors was created to see if they had done anything unconstitutional. So it wasn't left up to the Supreme Court. They actually made a Council of Censors to do that specific job. This Constitution clearly showed the early frustrations that Pennsylvania faced when they were being ruled by a British government. The people of Pennsylvania felt that the British monarch held too much power over them. That is why they created a system of government in which no one political body would have too much power. They did this by creating a system of checks and balances. However, not everyone was happy with the change that the Constitution brought. Many conservatives believed it was too democratic and liberal. These short-term limits, in fact, presented a problem of confusion and lack of stability. So in 1789, a state constitutional convention was held in order to address the problems of the 1776 Constitution. What came out of that meeting was the creation of the 1790 state constitution. This new constitutional differences included a bicameral legislature. So now you got House of Representatives and you got the senators, which are elected by the citizens of Pennsylvania in a general election. The reinstitution of a state governor, so they took out the president, brought the state governor back, who was elected for a 3-year term, and he had the power to veto. The judiciary was appointed by the governor and was removable by impeachment. The legislature could no longer take away individual rights protected by the state constitution of 1790. So a Bill of Rights. They had introduced a section of Bill of Rights into 1790. So that's the difference for 1790 Constitution. That's where the 1792 Kentucky Constitution comes out of. So I'm not sure if there's anything else that could be really said about the Pennsylvania Constitution. Soon after the adoption of the Constitution of 1776, it became apparent that there were many problems with it. And in the late to mid 1780s, the campaign began to change the Pennsylvania Constitution. The Assembly enacted a statute that created a constitutional convention in 1789. The convention met and created a new constitution, which the state adopted in 1790. Pennsylvania Constitution of 1790 resembled more modern constitutions with which we are familiar today. Provide for a bicameral legislature elected by the citizens at a general election, single governor elected for a 3-year term with the power to veto statutes, and for a judiciary appointed by the governor removable only by impeachment. A major advance was that the Declaration of Rights of the Constitution of 1790 prohibited the legislature from taking away the individual rights protected by the Declaration. So there's a Declaration of Rights in 1790. So there was a Bill of Rights, which the Kentucky's Constitution would take. Pennsylvania Constitution of 1790 had been described as a model constitution because of its workable frame of government with effective checks and balances, and its extensive Declaration of Rights that was expressly declared to be protected from arbitrary government action has created a workable government and protected citizen rights from arbitrary government invasion. And then there's a Pennsylvania Constitution 1838. So they didn't stick with theirs, just like Kentucky didn't stick with theirs either. I'm looking at the Constitution of Pennsylvania of 1790, and it's crazy. It's hard to actually it's simple to read, but it's not that simple. There's about, 10 articles. So there's 10 articles, and they're just in random different sections, and they don't have like titles to the articles or titles to the sections, and you just read it down a list. So I tried to look for the Bill of Rights. I couldn't find it. It starts out, Section 1, the legislative power of this Commonwealth shall be vested in a General Assembly, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The representatives shall be chosen annually by the citizens of the city of Philadelphia of each county respectively on the second Tuesday of October. So it's going down and it's talking about the representatives and talking about their powers, and then it's going to talk about the governor's powers. But a lot of the sections, a lot of the Bill of Rights was taken out of this, and so it's out there. I'm not going to go through and read it all, but that's my impressions of the overall thing, right? So the Kentucky Constitution, according to Wikipedia, the first constitutional convention was called by Colonel Benjamin Logan on December 22nd in 1784 in Danville, the capital of Kentucky County, Virginia. There are some relatively new ideas which were included in the 1792. One was the stipulation that the General Assembly vote by ballot instead of voice. I think they do by ballot now. Ballot makes it secret, so therefore they can vote their conscience. Voice is more effectively who says aye, who says nay, nay, and then it's it. By ballot it says, you can put your conscience and this is how I vote. Though it should be public ballot, so I'm not for sure if that actually covers it up or not. There's also a little requirement to that representation that General Assembly be based on population and not geography. So that was kind of progressive too. Then it needs to be evaluated. So second constitutional convention was called for in 1799. It took them 3 years to actually get it. They started out in 97, and then 98, and then eventually in 1799 they was able to get it out. So every one of the constitutions, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth one, were hard to get the constitutional conventions actually up and going because of the language of the Constitution itself made it hard for the convention. But a constitutional convention, by its very nature, by its revolutionary nature, maybe it shouldn't be codified. It should just be allowed to be done. Section 4 of Kentucky's Constitution allows, basically a violent overthrow of the government. So if you're allowed a violent overthrow of the government, then you should be, at the very least, allowed to have a peaceful constitutional convention to at least talk about possibly changing the Constitution. Unfortunately, the lack of referendum and initiative makes it virtually impossible to get the citizens to sign a petition in order to get any type of freedom from the state government, unless you get the legislature to put that amendment on the ballot themselves. So unless the legislatures themselves want to have a different constitution, it's going to be hard-pressed that will ever see a new constitution. 1891, so this thing has been around for, in Kentucky 124 years, 123 years. So it doesn't seem like it's going to go around, it seems like it's not going to go anywhere for quite some time. It's been here for 121 years. Meanwhile, it was one of 4 or 5 constitutions when the nation first started, 1792, 1799, 1850, 1891. So we've got 4 constitutions as boom, 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 one after another. And here we are today, 2014, happy with the 1891 Constitution. And there was the Senator's bill would eliminate office of the Kentucky Treasurer. They've already taken out the Railroad Commissioner. Now they're trying to take out the Kentucky Treasurer. And this actually brings up a story right before the 1891 Constitution, because those events that had happened in 1891 are just as important as the events that happened in 1790 in Pennsylvania. So the last time anyone saw former Kentucky State Treasurer James Honest Dick Tate, he was carrying 2 sacks of gold and silver coins from the Treasurer's office on March 14th, 1888. So in 1888, 3 years before the new Constitution was created, you have the fucking State Treasurer just rob the entire Treasury. He just takes 2 sacks of gold and silver coins from the Treasurer's office, and then that's it. So James Honest Dick Tate, his corruption promoted lawmakers to put term limits on state officials in 1891 when drafting the current state constitution, according to the Kentucky Encyclopedia. Now, 123 years after Kentucky's constitution was drafted, a northern Kentucky lawmaker will try to amend the constitution to eliminate the office of treasurer altogether. So there's no allegations of corruption. He just wants to save the state some money. The treasurer only signs the fucking bills and Stumbo's up for it, so they might eliminate this fucking treasurer position. So, I don't know. They just keep on fucking with the original Constitution so much, it's hard to determine what's law and what's not law, what's in play and what isn't in play. It almost seems as if like you have 120 governments, municipalities, county governments, and they're all with their own interpretation of the Constitution that they had been read, or that had been read to them in law school. That's what they understand about government, and they could have been read all the wrong things. So I think it would be helpful for anybody that's in office to relook at some of these documents to make sure that the assumptions that you had once held to be true are still true today. And just to refresh yourself. I mean, that's how are you going to be? I mean, self-correcting organization is going to exist forever. If you're just egotistical and say I'm always right, then you will fail no matter what, because you cannot be right 100% of the time. But if you're susceptible to change, then you can nudge in one way or another way, and then hopefully find the successful route.